Okay, back to Babylon.
The kings of the earth who committed fornication and live luxuriously will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, the mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come.
Here we see the political fallout. The flow of funny money is cut off. There will be no more borrowing money to gain political advantage, standard operating procedure among governments large and small today. It's called deficit spending, but in reality it's selling our children into slavery, just as our parents sold us. In a very real sense, access to this counterfeit capital is all that stands between many politicians and the unemployment line. As they spend you into an illusory prosperity and your children into slavery, they drive the gullible voters to the ballot box in enthusiastic droves. Vote yes on free lunch. I must confess that I've never really been able to read Revelation 18 without picturing New York City in my mind. I realize that's probably a provincial and limited view, that any city, even that one, could fully embody the evil of financial Babylon. After all, John wouldn't have called Rome Babylon in so many words if Nebuchadnezzar's capital on the Euphrates had been sufficient to describe the real character of the mother of harlots and abominations of which Yahweh is so concerned about teaching us. I need to remind myself that the Greek word for city, polis, in context may not mean so much a place as a system, for in John's day a city was the closest thing there was to a system, internally interlocking, interdependent, symbiotic, and self-interested, a living socio-economic organism. In the 21st century, such a polis need not be confined to a single location. That being said, this whole passage sure sounds like it could be post-rapture New York City. In my imagination, the very incarnation of the human pride and concentration of ill-gotten wealth that Yahweh so clearly despises. If one city in the world were to be singled out as the modern capital of Babylon in all its guises, this would have to be it. For example, the New York Stock Exchange is unquestionably the world's epicenter for what we see next.
And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise any more, merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and the bodies and souls of men. Revelation 18:9-13.
Imagine what would happen if all such trade suddenly stopped, and not just on Wall Street, but in every securities trading center. Remember what I said the Antichrist would probably do in response to the anarchy of the post-World War III period? I hypothesized that he would immediately freeze wages and prices. We need to understand that Satan knows nothing of freedom, of choice. His style is top-down control, something he has never been able to universally impose until now at the midpoint of the tribulation. The creation of markets through innovation and hard work is a byproduct of the creative nature of Yahweh that he built into us. That man has so often been motivated by greed or covetousness in his commercial endeavors doesn't change that fact. But creativity under the Antichrist's rule will give way to control, brutal, unbending, and complete. Take a look at that list through first-century eyes. In all of the categories we see here, media of exchange, apparel and fashion, building materials, food and beverages, transportation, and human resources, we see a decided leaning toward the high end of the scale, luxuries. In the middle of the list is that phrase, wine and oil, which reminds us of something we saw earlier. The third seal judgment pronounced, and I paraphrase, "The average man must work all day for barely enough to keep him alive, but the rich ruling elite will still enjoy their luxuries." Revelation 6:6. That was the state of affairs right into the dark days of World War III. The cream of society, who were prepared for it, rose above the stench of death, viewing the devastation as little more than an opportunity to buy the earth for a fraction of its worth. But here in Revelation 18, we see their plan coming apart. Not only is the market gone for luxury goods, so is their posh lifestyle.
The fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, who became rich by her, will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing.
There's that phrase again, the same thing we saw when the politicians witnessed the demise of Babylon. Now,
the merchants stand at a distance for fear of her torment.
Notice that it's not the merchants and politicians who have been destroyed, but the behind-the-scenes elite whose boots they've been licking for so many years. Now they're whistling a different tune. We don't even want to be in the same county with those people. What's happening to them might happen to us, too. Guilt by association, punishment by proximity. The same phenomenon is now seen even farther down the food chain, demonstrating two things. First, the influence and reach of the Babylonian system is pervasive indeed. And second, when the worm turns, nobody wants to be near the apple.
Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What is like this great city? They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, the great city, in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, O heaven, O you set-apart apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. Revelation 18:14-20.
New York has one of the busiest harbors in the world. Coincidence? If you say so. Sadly, there's a third thing happening here, or rather, not happening. Nobody seems to recognize the evil nature of Babylon. All they know is that she's suffering a violent and sudden death, and that's going to hit them hard in the wallet. Those who witness her demise aren't even cognizant of their own culpability before God. They're merely afraid of the poverty they now see looming in their futures. Once again, we need to take a lesson from September 11th. The terrorist attacks came with a price tag. Some say their direct and indirect costs exceeded $100 billion. We all stood back wringing our hands, saying stupid things like, "No place is safe anymore. We must find a way to protect ourselves." But we all saw the names of the perpetrators, mostly Saudis, not Afghans, in the newspapers, learned of their motivations and their beliefs, and read their handwritten prayers to Allah. We all listened to the tapes of Osama bin Laden, telling us plainly that his terrorist organization, Al-Qaeda, was nothing, that Islam was everything. And yet, with all that evidence, there still aren't 100 people in America who are willing to stand up and tell the truth, that the reason we were attacked is the evil teaching of Islam, and that if we don't fight Islam itself, we will never make any progress towards curtailing its terrorism. My point is simply this. There's a trend developing here, and it isn't good. We once fought against Nazism. Then we compromised with communism. Today we refuse to acknowledge the obvious evils of Islam. But during the tribulation, men won't even recognize the existence of Babylon, the most pervasive, all-encompassing evil of them all. What will it take to get their attention? a cut in salary. But what happens? How is Babylon overthrown in 1 hour? Here's how John describes it, but I'm afraid it raises more questions than it answers.
Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down, and shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman or any craft shall be found in you any more, and the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more. The sight of a lamp shall not shine in you any more. The voice of bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and those set apart, and of all who were slain on the earth. Revelation 18:21 through 24.
Okay, I'll admit it. I'm confused. Just when this started sounding like the destruction of a real physical city, in my imagination New York, we get down to that last sentence, which clearly doesn't fit the Big Apple in any literal sense. But according to prophetic precedent, it's perfectly normal for Yahweh to mix literal, that is, physical, fulfillments with metaphorical ones. If New York represents the sins of Babylon, God could literally wipe it off the face of the earth, directly fulfilling this prophecy, in symbolic retribution for the evil system that has been seducing men to their eternal deaths and persecuting the saints of Yahweh ever since the days of Adam. Let's review the facts. The Babylon of which John speaks, if you put it all together, is a system of evil that permeates the earth, a system of religion, politics, and commerce that Yahweh will utterly destroy through miraculous and violent means of his own choosing. Those who benefited by it will lament its passing. Political leaders, merchants, and middlemen, those involved in shipping, are specifically seen mourning her loss, as Babylon's domination of the entertainment industry, that's harpists, the industrial base, craftsmen, agribusiness, the sound of the millstone, and the energy industry, the light of the lamp, come to an end the normal cycle of life, called the voice of the bridegroom and bride, will be disrupted. Because the most detailed description of her fall comes in Revelation 17 and 18, near the end of the book, after all the seal, trumpet, and bowl judgments have been pronounced, many thoughtful students of Scripture assume that commercial Babylon's hour of demise occurs near the end of the 7-year tribulation. After all, the 7th and final bowl judgments include this statement, "And great Babylon was remembered before God, to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath." Revelation 16:19. The angel that delivered the details concerning the fall of Babylon to John was one of the angels of the 7 bowls, the last series of judgments to be revealed. But although John no doubt wrote these things down in the order he saw them, his book is replete with parentheticals and flashbacks. It's obviously not laid out in strict chronological order. The death of commercial Babylon actually makes far more logistical sense if we place her sudden destruction during World War III, the nuclear phase of the War of Magog. Remember the phrase, "For in 1 hour she is made desolate."